all again. Two of us will reintroduce ourselves, and two of you will be introduced for the first time. My name is Elliot Sapp, I am the presiding judge in Department 10 in the Second Judicial District Court, and my colleagues will now tell you who they are.
I'm Ken Brook. I'm a representative for Congressman Mark Amday.
Good afternoon, I'm Frank Flaherty. I'm an attorney in Carson City, and I'm a member of Nevada's Board of Continuing Legal Education.
Fred Locken, professor of political science at Bucky Meadows Community College. You can introduce yourselves as well.
We are Arena High School's Unit 1. My name is April Wilde.
My name is Noah Jamalski.
My name is Megan Stetler.
My name is Matthew Zane. Our unit coach is Mr. Brian Carlin, and our teacher is Mr. Richard Clark.
Well, let's continue to talk some more about the foundation of the Constitution. How did both classical Republicans and natural rights philosophies influence the founders' views about government? What are the essential differences between classical Republicanism and natural rights philosophy? Why did both classical Republicans and natural rights philosophers stress the need for education and preparation for citizenship?
Alluding to a government formed by people complicit in its function, the opening words of the Constitution exemplify the founders' views on government. These three words, we the people, not only describe the government's genesis of the people, but also their responsibilities thereof. Born of the new science of politics described by Alexander Hamilton, the founders' views accumulate in a classical Republican base of civic virtue and a government organization modified to protect natural rights and garner authority through the consent of the government.
Classical Republicanism and natural rights philosophy fundamentally differ in which characteristic of the people is emphasized. Classical Republicanism stresses the duty of citizens to carry out the common good, while natural rights philosophy focuses on the responsibility of the government in protecting the individual rights of people. Despite these differences, the ideals of natural rights philosophy are an expansion of classical Republican theories, culminating in a Republican system that protects the rights of citizens who have consented to those protective measures. This idea is exemplified in the Declaration, where it states that governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed.
The founders greatly admired the Roman Republic, for it relied heavily on elections, as well as a system of checks and balances through a Senate and People's Assembly. The term republicanism did not exist during the classical era, but the term res publica was in use to describe the government. This term is translated as the public affair, and greatly represents the virtues that the Roman Republic is built on.
Classical Republican aspects of common good and civic virtue support the idea that government is a shared responsibility of the people, for there is an emphasis on the duty of the citizen in acting in the government's interests. However, the Roman system also possessed many ways to protect the rights of its citizens. In Cicero's The Laws and the Republic, he explores the concept of natural law and equality under law.
Natural rights philosophy as a function of government originates from English philosopher Thomas Hobbes' social contract theory. In Leviathan, Hobbes emphasizes that sacrifice is necessary in the establishment of government. This theory runs parallel with the classical Republican notion of sacrificing rights for the common good. Further refining Hobbes' theories, Jean-Jacques Rousseau popularized the idea of general will in relation to social contract theory, to link sacrificing natural rights with guaranteed sovereignty. English philosopher John Locke takes this even further by expanding guaranteed sovereignty to include unalienable rights to life, liberty, and property. There is a clear progression as classical republicanism's fundamental principles of sacrifice and common good evolve into the social contract theories evident from the founding documents.
Thus, the Roman system demonstrates Cicero's mixed state, in which there's a balance of powers between the monarchy, aristocrats, and common people, paralleled by Baron de Montesquieu's separation of powers, in which Montesquieu also outlines a system of balancing and limiting the powers of government within itself. Cicero's ideal government, in conjunction with Locke's separation of powers, would influence the framers to create a similar system of checks and balances, as seen in the articles such as the executive right to veto in Article 2, Section 2, or the judicial power to strike laws in Article 3, Section 2.
In Lives of Eminent Philosophers, Aristotle is noted as saying, the educated differ from the uneducated as much as the living from the dead, implying that education is vital to an engaged society. Classical Republicans viewed education as a means to make society virtuous and knowledgeable in regards to its own institution and politics, for the central goal of education was preparation for citizenship and participation. Robert Condicio, educational reformer for charter schools, admires classical Republican views of education, stating, without educated citizens, a republic does not have a chance to survive. Even today, some classical Republican concepts are reiterated with our current educational philosophy.
From a natural rights perspective, education will prepare students to engage with and advance the political system. Natural rights philosophers such as Rousseau emphasize education and preparation for citizenship in order to promote a competitive, educated populace. And Emile, Rousseau wrote, "Make the
citizen good by training, and everything else will follow. Through an educated youth, society can advance through competition, establishing a precedent for progress based on the ideals put forth in natural rights theory and classical republicanism. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ken, you want to start us out?
Absolutely. What civic virtues would you say are most important for your generation in this day and age?
The classical republican ideal of basically moral education, or this progression of teaching the younger generations how to not only how to participate within their government morally, but not only to have those moral principles in line, particularly in the modern age with how technology applies itself or how we interact with each other online, is very important.
The idea of civil discourse is also incredibly important, especially since in this day and age there is a polarization between the two parties, and it's important for young people to realize that they're all working for the same cause. They want all better the nation. And so this discourse would help them realize this and see the perspectives of other sides.
Going along with this point, Aristotle said that men are by nature political animals. So political parties are bound to exist from a classical republican point of view, but if we are able to have civil discourse and listen to each other, that will better our society rather than experiencing gridlock and dissension.
Going along with my colleagues, I would say that it's important to teach the younger minds about how to use the First Amendment to your advantage and to spread your ideas with civil discourse and volunteering and getting yourself involved because of the emergence of new ideas and new technology.
What about the concept of civil disobedience instead of civil discord? Is that a virtue that maybe some young people would do a little bit more of to get their point across?
Well, Mahatma Gandhi introduced this idea of satyagraha in the sense that you pursue all legal courses of revolution or all legal courses of dissent before you then begin to disobey your laws, or then before you begin to dissent through disobedience to the laws. And I think what much of modern, or what many young people today fail to recognize is that first movement towards obeying the law, and then pursuing all avenues of revolution through the law first, and then applying themselves through disobedience afterwards.
Furthermore, Martin Luther King Jr. said that civil disobedience is the highest respect for the law in his letter for Birmingham jail. And one needs to understand and know the law, or know the laws by heart to enact civil disobedience.
Frank, what do you think? You have a question?
I do. What is civic virtue, and why did classical republicans think it was essential?
Civic virtue is essentially helping out your community and participating in your community, helping each other. So it goes along with the enlightened self-interest that many natural rights theorists postulated, but the classical republicans, such as Aristotle, believe this was very important. Aristotle compared a society to a dinner party, where the food at a dinner party is going to be much better if many people bring in, it's not supplied by one man. So essentially, it encourages helping each other, not focusing on self-interest or not just pursuing things out of your own good.
Why is that essential?
Essentially, if you have a country, or if you have a body that is populated by a group of people who have no interest in contributing to it, there's no really unifying force within there, and there's no reason for that country or for that entity to exist. Without these people willing to contribute, or without these people willing to participate in that community can neither progress nor can it really engage with any other body.
It also furthers the idea of a common good. Aristotle said that the common good is necessary for the functioning government, and without the common good, a government would just fail.
Frank?
Following up on that, what might be the consequences of too great an emphasis on the common good? Or excuse me, no, too great an emphasis on individual rights at the expense of the common good?
Aristotle said that an emphasis on individualism would create a direct democracy, which he considers the worst possible government in the world, because it completely destroys the common good. And without a common good, a government cannot function.
An emphasis on too many individual rights could lead a society to chaos, essentially. There are two important aspects to government, and that is individual rights and security. And security is what goes along
society will essentially descend into chaos.
In the minute that we have left, I'd like to look at the question from the other side under Frank. What about the consequences of a society with too great an emphasis on the common good? How could that impact individual liberties?
Well, we see this again failing in very communalistic societies, most prevalently perhaps in late communist Russia, where there was such an emphasis on the community and such an emphasis on the group rather than the individual that there was very little imperative for individuals to then progress or to then try to innovate within society.
Anyone else? You got a couple seconds? If you want to use them.
Additionally, there's also very little room for political discourse without individual thought or without emphasis on the individual. And there's very little emphasis or opportunity for political dissension because, of course, if there's too much emphasis on the group, there's not a lot of leeway, there's not a lot of freedom felt by the people in order to really apply themselves into some sort of dissenting group or into some sort of group that provides opposition discourse to whatever the majority will make.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Would you like to start us out with some comments?
Yes, jump right in the comments. I really found the testimony very solid, well thought out, which was then further demonstrated during the question period to literally provide such vertical depth of understanding, excellent use of quotations and examples. From a constructive point of view, certainly I would be remiss and I suspect my colleagues would be able to help on that front, but
Yeah, it was obvious that you'd mastered the materials at a high level. You just didn't have the basic concepts, you understood the nuances. But what I appreciate beyond that was that it was obvious to me that you given some thought as to how they all fit together or not. And I really think that showed during the cross-examination especially. It was a very good job.
I agree that you did a very good job as well. You brought in not just the sources that our nation was founded upon, but you even brought up Somalia, Gandhi, which I don't think most people have even considered in their testimony. The shining moment for me, though, that just showed the depth of your understanding, I don't want to make it sound like you're being set up by Judge Sattler, but when asked about pursuing civil disobedience as a civic virtue, rather than what I would say taking the bait and saying, oh yeah, we should definitely use that as a civic virtue, you actually kind of step back a little bit and cited Gandhi as saying that that should be your last resort. Could have been because you were in the presence of an actual judge that you don't want to advocate civil disobedience. By the way, your backtracking off the back definitely showed me a good understanding.
Just very briefly, you did an outstanding job. I was very impressed with the fact that you hit on all of the big players. I mean, you said all of the buzzwords that we're all sitting here waiting for you to say. But then you also were able to weave in some of the second tier of the bench players. And so you got them in front of us as well. And you weren't just saying the words. My colleagues have said it, and I agree. You were actually demonstrating that you knew what you were talking about. And there's a difference between those two things. It's easy just to say Cicero. If I were to say to you, what did Cicero think about this? If your mouth hits the table, then you have a problem. So you did a good job because you knew all of those things. I was also very impressed with the pace of your presentation. It was neither too fast nor too slow. Your voice tones were all very good, and you helped each other out very well. You were polite and respectful. You transitioned between each other, and you didn't always agree. You can disagree without being disagreeable, even on the same committee, and so it was very impressive. And you were the first people I ever